Dragons have the potential to create some of the most epic moments in any Dungeons & Dragons campaign, and for good reason. The name is literally right there in the title. But for many reasons, they can also be one of the most challenging creatures to effectively run. Despite the fact that all the dragons tend to have pretty similar stat blocks, their personalities, their lairs, their battle tactics are all so dramatically different that you may as well consider each one a completely different creature. So today we are going to be discussing the Green Dragon, the most devious and sinister of all of the chromatics, as we dive deep and explore its personality, its lair, and its battle strategies. I am borrowing this structure from DM Timothy, who had an amazing video recently about black dragons. You're definitely going to want to check that out as well. I'll leave it linked. Green dragons are the embodiment of cunning in all of dragonkind. They are manipulators, deceivers, and psychological predators. Whereas red dragons tend to rule with much more of a heavy hand with all of their fire and fury, green dragons tend to prefer a much more subtle approach, typically involving lies and charm and the slow corrosion of trust. What makes green dragons so terrifying is not really their raw brute strength, though they have plenty of that to be sure, but rather it's that they're the most treacherous of all of the chromatics. They're not seeking a simple win. They are seeking the systematic unraveling and domination of their foes, and they'll watch it all happen with a coy grin on their face. In practical terms, if you're the DM, the key to effectively running a green dragon is to exercise restraint, as difficult as that might be. There should be almost no circumstances where one of these will reveal its true self, and it will almost certainly never resort to a fight, unless the outcome is more or less already decided in its favor. It's also incredibly important to effectively use the dragon's voice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's just going to walk on up to the party and talk to them. Have your green dragon send out messages through magical means, or way more menacingly, use its agents, those that are already under its control and have been corrupted by its influence, to spread that misinformation. Plant some seeds that might fall right into the dragon's clutches, or even pit some party members against each other in more subtle ways. While an agent will never just tell a party member to directly attack one another, maybe one night while they're sharing drinks by the fire, it might suggest that isn't it a tad strange that your so-called ally didn't tell you all about the locket that they carry, or maybe that one of their tattoos is actually the symbol of a demon lord. These are some of the more subtle and conniving tricks of manipulation that green dragons and their network of agents tend to employ. Nothing appeals to a green dragon quite as much as bending the wills of others to their own. Every single encounter with one is a test, even if you don't realize that it's happening. When a green dragon speaks, it's unlikely that any semblance of truth will be exiting their mouths. Every single word is steeped with layered thoughts and this precisely curated language to leave you feeling flattered, but simultaneously confused and maybe also filled with a little bit of doubt, which is exactly what the green dragon is looking to latch onto. To make it very Gen Z, they're the masters of gaslighting. Why would they ever feel the need to confront anything when it can be completely discredited or shredded from the inside out? Again, these are not the types of creatures who are hell-bent on violence and looking for a fight. Instead, they're the type to sneakily burn the house down and then seek all the congratulations and the favors for managing to put out that fire and save the day. A green dragon will absolutely watch the world burn to be the king of the ashes. While all the chromatics drag a stench of arrogance around with them, none of them is more refined than that of the green dragon. They don't boast of their power, their strength, their intellect, or their wit. That's far too pompous and on the nose for them. A green dragon should never have to raise its voice, and during roleplay moments, you can kind of reinforce this through its charm and civility and its intelligence over any actual threats. Give the dragon a calm and confident tone with a slight hint of condescension just beneath the surface. They should never need to beg or panic. A green dragon is always 2 steps ahead. These creatures are master puppeteers. They view the world as their personal chessboard, with humans being nothing more than an ordinary pawn for them to use. With us being so easily tempted by riches or grandeur, or so eager to believe our own hype, a green dragon does not even need to work particularly hard to start twisting and manipulating us. In game terms, this can manifest itself in a few ways through magic or various spells. The new green dragon actually already has a few spells that work perfectly well for this kind of thing, but there's also nothing to say that you can't switch them up and make it a little bit more interesting. Looking at their list, they've already got access to Geish and Modified Memory, 2 spells that can be incredibly effective at controlling others. While Geish doesn't actually compel any particular course of action, a simple suggestion or direction planted in the mind of the receiver, which is then met with mind-wrenching and staggering pain if they choose to deviate. This gives the receiver the impression that their master is always watching and will not hesitate to inflict incredible pain should they disobey. These on its own, a villager or maybe some kind of warrior or a noble in the court describing the sensations and the things that they're feeling, which ends up leading the group to need to investigate further, sounds like such an incredible plot hook just by itself. Then there's modified memory. What if that same guard or noble goes missing and is then found shambling around near the edges of the wood? He begins to describe the experiences of everything he went through, but unbeknownst to anyone, it's all a lie. Not even that he's specifically lying, but because the green dragon had abducted him and then found out all of their secrets and modified their memory and then sent them back on their merry way into the town to serve its own interests. This thing just kind of writes itself. One thing that should definitely be noted is that despite their tendency towards subtlety, green dragons are certainly not pacifists. At the end of the day, a dragon is still a ferocious predator. If one of these would-be pawns is causing some trouble or pushing back against it, the dragon will not take any issue with, let's say, terminating their services. Above all, green dragons crave control, and they can obtain that control in many ways, and fear is just one of the tools in their arsenal that will allow them to retain control over their own image. If they had it their way, green dragons would be revered as gods, so far above the mere trivial existence of the mortals that simply live to serve their ends. Looking at the green dragon's lair, this is where things really start to come alive. And what better way to help you do that than with this video sponsor, Describe. From creating the lush forest environments to providing the incredible ambience in the soundtrack for the encounter, to not just describing the dragon, but also to giving you incredibly detailed advice for the setting and then executing on the full scene with your green dragon, Describe has you fully covered. And best of all, in a world where everything is rapidly being taken over AI, Describe is proud to have all of its content created by humans. So check out Describe using my link in the description and code InsightCheck to double the length of your free trial to a full month. Thanks to Describe for sponsoring this video. A green dragon's lair is way more than just its hideout. Everything about the lair is designed to provide the dragon with an edge or an advantage. Again, it's all about control. Green dragons will often house their lairs deep within these ancient forests, and importantly, like everything else with these creatures, it's all about subtlety. Its lair should not be obvious. It's not meant to be found and explored, but rather it's intended to be entered unknowingly, that by the time you realize where you even are, it's already too late. As a DM, you can use this environment to begin to build tension long before the party ever even catches a single glimpse of the dragon, or even gets confirmation that it exists. Establish the dragon's influence over the region. Mechanically speaking, you can do this by incorporating many of the regional effects into the game. The 2024 Monster Manual did cut out some of these, but I also see absolutely no issue with bringing back some of the suggestions from the old 2014 Monster Manual, and maybe even throwing in some of your own where they make sense and apply. We've got these enormous thickets that crop up within 1 mile of the dragon's lair that are designed to distract, confuse, disorient, and massively slow down. These thickets not only block immediate line of sight, but they also might force the party to move at a dramatically slower pace than they really would want to. Again, this is all about control for the dragon. Doing this gives ample time for them to fully understand the scale and preparedness of any interlopers, but it also helps make the party feel like they're trapped. Birds and other small rodents act as the dragon's eyes and ears within its lair, and they're able to communicate telepathically with their master as well. Hinting at the presence of these animals and mentioning all the different eyes that are trained on them as they make their way through the thicket is a great way to let the party know that they're being watched, which can not only help the dragon get the drop on a group, but also escape should they see fit. Because it's important to remember that the green dragon is just not interested in a fair fight. It wants to win well before the battle has already even begun, and it should know absolutely everything that is happening in and around its lair. Not only can it use these birds and different animals to communicate with it telepathically, but it also has the ability to move without leaving any physical evidence of its existence, unless it specifically wishes to, which again it can use to toy with or mess with the party. Give your group the feeling that they are never alone. When designing its lair, it's important to consider misdirection and control as core pillars. Even things like traps shouldn't necessarily deal damage when they can isolate or split the party. Even the thickets themselves that we already mentioned, they are slowly poisoning the air around them, causing anyone who dares to rest near a green dragon's lair the potential to be poisoned. A green dragon loves to play with its food. When considering the different types of treasure that you might place within a green dragon's hoard, it might not be exactly what you typically expect. To quote the Monster Manual directly, a green dragon's favorite treasures are the sentient creatures that it bends to its will, including significant figures such as popular heroes, well-known sages, or renowned bards. Now, obviously, you're not just going to place a literal person inside a green dragon's hoard. I mean, or maybe you do, that could be pretty cool. but you could potentially consider their freedom from the dragon's mastery to be part of these larger scale rewards. These types of dragons, unsurprisingly, work better when their defeat is tied up in these much more broad and sweeping story events, which you can emphasize by placing these other baubles that they collect within their hoards. Given their affinity for secrets and extortion, green dragons will have no shortage of incriminating letters or documents or family heirlooms or other various sentimental treasures, which can also be rolled from the new Arcana table in the Dungeon Master's Guide if you're looking for additional inspiration. Family heirlooms or other sentimental treasures can certainly be magical in nature, but also gold. There's really no way you can go wrong with gold. When it comes to battle strategy, this is where things get really spicy. Regardless of which age of dragon you're using, whether it's a wormling, young, adult, or ancient, one thing is consistently true, and that is incredible mobility. Even just the green dragon wormling has a 60-foot fly speed and a 30-foot swim speed. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to make use of this maneuverability, because this is how the dragon is going to be able to continually stay one step ahead during combat. Like I've mentioned before, green dragons don't often like to fight. They'll do it if they feel that they need to, or more likely, when the odds are so far in their favor that they believe that they already won. One piece of advice that I often see floating around that I don't really subscribe to is that for all dragons, generally speaking, you should never land them. However, having just said this, I think there are very few circumstances where a green dragon would actually land. It is far too paranoid and focused on control to even consider doing that. As a result, if you're running the wormling or the young variant, you're going to want to do your best to take as much advantage of your breath weapon as you possibly can. These have a reasonable spread at being 15 and 30-foot cones respectively, and dealing 66 or 12d6 poison damage, which is not unreasonable. But when you're not using your breath weapon, use your movement to take advantage of the environment. Fly up and out of range of spells that you might expect if possible, or dive below the water to make it more difficult for anyone to properly see you. This can be one of the best ways to deal with a party while you're waiting for your breath weapon to recharge, since it isn't all that often that players are going to have sufficient tools to allow them to fight effectively underwater. And the great part about being a green dragon is that if you've done all of the other things that we've already discussed in the lead up to this point, you should basically be aware of pretty much anything the party can do without even technically metagaming. You gotta remember, it's unlikely that a green dragon would have ever ended up in this fight if they didn't feel completely prepared. The unfortunate thing about the wormling and young green dragons is that their stat blocks are not particularly interesting. Outside of their breath weapon, which is admittedly great, they're mostly just bags of hit points. Now, this can be mitigated to some degree by leveraging as much as you possibly can out of its movement and breath weapon like I've just discussed, but you also need to remember that you do have access to both blind sight and dark vision. Almost nothing is escaping your keen eyes, and you should keep that at the forefront of your mind. Now, adult and ancient green dragons do have a little bit more going on for them. Yes, they do still have a whole heap of hit points and solid armor classes, but they finally have access to some additional features that can keep things a lot more interesting. Now, it should go without saying that all of the movement tactics that we've already discussed will 100% carry over completely to the older variants of dragons, and honestly, to an even higher degree since all of their movement speeds have increased across the board. You breath weapon, then you get out of the way by either flying or swimming, and then you prepare. You bide your time. But if you can't, you now also have access to both legendary actions and legendary resistance. Remember that green dragons will probably know just about everything about your party, especially their capabilities. They are extremely unlikely to burn a legendary resistance on something like a fireball. They'll be more than willing to tank that hit, knowing that something that might cause more of a physical impairment could be on the way. They will gladly and knowingly wait to use a legendary resistance for something that might restrain them, like a cast of Hold Monster. The last thing that a green dragon wants to be is pinned down, and by being patient and waiting and exercising restraint with legendary resistance, this is not only a great way to make the fight more challenging, but it's also a great way to get into the party's head and have them begin to question how the dragon seems to know exactly what to do and when. This battle should be almost as much physical as it is psychological. In the action section, things really begin to kick up a notch. We have our multi-attack that provides 3 rends, but also allows to swap one of those with the use of Mind Spike at either 3rd or 5th level, depending on the age of the dragon that we're using. This means that it's either 48 or 68 psychic damage that you can deal every single round using Mind Spike. And remember that the spell is at will, so you can legitimately do this every single round. Now, the beauty of Mind Spike is that it can quite literally get in your party's head. Not only does it deal psychic damage, which resistance to can be fairly hard to come by, but it also prevents the affected target from being able to benefit from the invisible condition against us. Now, this is extra devious in the 2024 rules because hiding provides the invisible condition, so you literally cannot get away from the green dragon at all. And it's also important to remember that those Wrens now do have some range behind them as well, with the adults being at 10 feet, which is the same as the young, but the ancient green dragon gets a 15-foot range on their rend attack. Moving on to the legendary actions, these are just insane. Remember that you can use these after anyone's turn except for the green dragons itself. Here, we can just spam Mind Spike at 3rd or 5th level, which can stack up the damage insanely quickly. Or we can use our Pounce, which not only lets us to move up to half our speed, but also allows us to make another rend attack, which again, can be made at range, so it's less likely that we're going to be risking an opportunity attack in the process, and it gives us plenty of speed to make a getaway just in case, if necessary. On making getaways though, a green dragon is not afraid to retreat, but it does so with a purpose. It's not running from the fight, it's choosing a better one. Use this incredible burst of speed or this immense movement available to get away, regroup, plan an ambush, and get ready for another go. And then our final legendary action is Noxious Miasma, which lets you drop this absolute bomb in the middle of the battlefield, yes, dealing some damage, but way more importantly, reducing the AC of anybody in the range who fails their saving throw. Now, yes, most of what our green dragon is doing does involve saving throws, whether it's our breath weapon, Mind Spike, or Noxious Miasma itself, but lowering AC can be valuable for a few reasons. Firstly, it helps with our Wrens, but also minions. Don't be afraid to sprinkle in some minions, not only to give the encounter a little bit more oomph and depth, but also to help sell and lend credence to the fact that these are beasts that are bending others to their will. Common minions include goblins, ettercaps, edens, kobolds, orcs, yuan-ti, and even elves on occasion. Ettercaps make for some excellent minions since they have the ability to restrain and immobilize targets with their webs, and even inflict the poison condition. Yuan-ti abominations make a great minion as well if it's a higher level encounter for much of the same reason that the ettercap does. So that's it. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of inspiration or some better idea about how to effectively run green dragons in your campaign, and not exclusively in combat scenarios. These are incredibly 3-dimensional beasts, and running them in any other way is just doing them a disservice. Let me know if you enjoyed this type of video, and if so, what do you think I should cover next? But otherwise, take care.